If you watched the previous video on the study of the Presocratics, you have a more than adequate background to evaluate the Presocratic fragments we're about to show you and compare them with the Hippocratic author's explanation of how rainwater comes about. As we said in our videos on Chapter 8, the Hippocratic author writes a veritable monograph on the formation of rainwater. Let's refresh our memory and outline how his argument unfolds. He says that rainwaters are the lightest and sweetest and finest and clearest, and because of these properties, the healthiest to drink. This is explained by the processes of evaporation, concoction, and cloud formation. To begin with, he asserts that the sun raises and draws up the finest and lightest part of water. This is proven by the formation of the salts. The briny part of water is left in place on account of its thickness and weight, and it becomes the salts, while the finest part the sun draws up because of its lightness. This happens not only with salt lakes, but also with the sea and with whatever has moisture in it, and there is moisture in everything, including in human beings. The sun also draws off the finest and lightest part of our bodily humors. This is proven by observing what happens to the sweat of a man wearing a cloak, first in the sun, then in the shade. For this reason, he adds parenthetically, rainwater also grows foul quicker than any other and has a bad smell because it is collected and mixed from many sources. He resumes the argument by explaining what happens to this finest and lightest part of Earth's water after evaporation. It is swirled around and mixed with the atmosphere, and another separation occurs. The turbid dark part that results from this movement separates itself and becomes mist and fog, while the clearest and lightest part of it is left in place and is sweetened by the sun, being heated and boiled by it, just as all other things always become sweeter through cooking, so the Greeks believed. Now, as long as this sweetened part is scattered and uncondensed, it is carried about in the upper air. But as soon as it collects anywhere and is compressed into one place owing to sudden contrary winds, then wherever it finds itself most condensed, it bursts. And he explains in a little more detail the formation of clouds and cloudbursts. That is why rainwater is the lightest and sweetest and finest and clearest. The part of this Hippocratic argument that most often invokes comparison to the Presocratics is the question of salt formation. Why, the Pusicoi asked, is the sea salty, and where did the sea come from? Jacques Juana and others cite in this regard 4 fragments. The first is DK A27 for Anaximander. After Thales, Anaximander is the earliest of the Ionian Pusiologoi. In A27, Diels puts 3 testimonia for Anaximander's opinion on the origin of the sea and its salinity. The first is from the beginning of Book 2 of Aristotle's Meteorologica, which book is about the origin of the sea. Peri de talates, kai tis hepusis autes, kai dia tin aetian halmiron tos utonestin hudatos pletos, etide perites ex arches genese os legomen. As translated in the Lobe, our next subject is the sea and its nature, the problem of why so great a volume of water is salt and of its original formation. As often, Aristotle begins by giving the view of his predecessors. Hoemen archaioi kai diatribuntes perites theologias poi usin autes pegas. The ancients who concern themselves with theology make the sea have sources, that is, as being formed from pre-existing bodies of water. For this mythological or theological view, think, for example, of the springs and rivers that feed the deified ocean in Hesiod's Theogony. hoide sopoteroi ten anthropinen sopian, poi usin autes genesin. Those who are more versed in secular philosophy make it have a beginning, for they say that, and here's where Diel's picked up, enagar to proton hygron hapanta ton periten gen topon. For they say that at first the whole region about the earth was wet. Hypoda tu heliu xerainomenon tomen diatmisan pneumata kai tropas heliu kai selenes pasi poien, toda lepten thalatan enai. But as this region was being dried up by the sun, the water that evaporated, to diatmisan, became the cause of winds and the turnings of sun and moon, by which is meant most likely the solar solstices and the lunar phases, while what was left is the sea. Dio kai elato ginestai xeranomenen oiontai kai telos eses typote pasang xeran. Consequently, they believe that the sea is still drying up and becoming less, and that in the end a time will come when it is all dried up. Now here, as often, Aristotle didn't associate a specific name with this opinion. The next citation in A27 is from Alexander of Aphrodisias's commentary on this passage of the Metaorologica. It basically reproduces Aristotle's words, but Alexander is good enough to let us know that the holders of this opinion which Aristotle was summarizing were, according to Theophrastus, Anaximander, and Diogenes of Apollonia. So, in Anaximander's cosmology, the force of evaporation not only left behind the sea on Earth's surface, but caused the winds and the solar solstices and the lunar phases, and the process would eventually entirely dry up what was left of water on Earth, an extreme and reverse form of the climate change we are experiencing today. Very interesting and worthy of further investigation, but not here, unfortunately. The third citation in A27 is from the doxographic tradition. It is the first doxa recorded for the sixth topic in Diel's reconstructed Aetius, Book 3. If you follow the cross-reference to DG, you'll see the name of that topic is Peritalases pos suneste kai pos esti pikra, concerning the sea, how it came into being, and why it is bitter, i.e. salty. Anaximandros, ten talasan pesin enai tes protes hugrasias lepsanon, hes tomen pleon meros anexerana topir, toda hypolepten diaten ekkalsin metabalen. Anaximander says that the sea is the residue of the first wetness, the greatest part of which the fire, i.e. sun, drew up and dried out, i.e. evaporated, and the remaining part of which it transformed, i.e. transformed into salty bitterness, on account of the complete coction, ekkalsis. The saltwater sea is explained in this characteristically Aetian soundbite by the dual phenomenon of evaporation and coction, very similarly to AWP, but with no supporting detail. Xenophanes of Colophon had a similar conception, judging from the Aetian fragment in DK A46. Again, if we follow the cross-reference to DG, we see the name of the topic is found in Stobaeus, Perinepon omikles hueton drosukionos pacnes kalasdes. Xenopanes, apotes tu heliu thermotetos hos arctices aetias tan metarsiois sumbainen. Anelkomenugar ectes talates tu hygru, toglucu diaten leptomerian diacrinomenon, nepeta sinistanen homic lumenon, kai katastasden ombrus hypopilesaos, kai diatmisden ta pneumata. Grapegar diareden, peged hudatos. Xenophanes says, that it is due to the heat of the sun as initial cause that celestial phenomena arise. Ta metarsia is an alternative form of ta meteora. For the wet being drawn upwards from the sea, the sweet part being separated out due to the fineness of its particles turns into mist and forms clouds, and trickles down in drops of rain due to compression or felting, and vaporizes the winds. For he expressly writes, sea is the source of water. The verbatim quote Aetius references gives us as B31. Xenophanes, like some of the older Presocratics and like Lucretius years later in Latin, wrote in verse. Pege desti talas hudatos, pege danemoio, utigar en animos ken anel pontu megaloio, utehro ai potamon, ut aetheros ombrion hudor. Alla megas pontos genitor nepeon anemonte kai potamon. The sea is the source of water and of wind, for without the great sea there would be no wind, nor streams of rivers, nor rainwater from on high. But the great sea is the begetter of clouds, winds, and rivers. Aetius 3:4 has 4 other doxai on the subject, peri nepon, omikles, etc., which, while not the ones cited by the Hippocratic editors, are nevertheless all of interest with regard to cloud formation and rain. The 5th doxa is from the atomist Epicurus. Epicurus flourished around 300 BCE and doesn't qualify as a pre-Socratic, and there's no question of mutual influence with AWP. But for the sake of completeness, Epikuros apo ton atomon. Epicurus says, clouds are made of atoms, or small particles. Strongulainestai ten kalastan kaiton hueton apo tes makras kataporas hypopeplas menon. That hail and rain are shaped into a round figure during their long descent. Kai pneumamen apotelen par osan ta nepe, ombrus de diakean, kalas dan de plesan, kionas de sumperi labomenonti tu aerodus. And that wind produces clouds having shunted these particles, rains having dispersed them, hail having filled them, and snows having included with them some portion of the airy nature. The Metrodorus here is presumably Metrodorus of Lampsacus, a 5th century contemporary and friend of Anaxagoras. Metrodorus says that clouds are combined or formed by the air from the watery vapor. Metrodoros apotes hudatodus anaporas hypo tu aeros sin istas ta nepe. Anaximenes was one of the Milesian material monists and was the younger contemporary of Anaximander. Anaximenes nepe men ginestai pacuncentos epipleon tu aeros, malonde episynaccentos ec thlibestai tus ombrus, ciona de epedanto cataperomenon hudor page, calasdan de hotan sumperi lepte titoi hugroi pneumatikon. Anaximenes says, clouds come about when the air is condensed. Rainwater is squeezed out when the air is even more condensed. Snow whenever the falling rainwater coalesces. And hail whenever some windy portion is included together with the moisture. Notice the similarity of the phrase sumperi lepte titoi hugroi pneumatikon with sumperi labomenonti tu aerodus in Epicurus. Finally, Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras nepe men kai kiona paraplesios, kalas dande hotan apoton pagento nepon pro ostetina prostengen ere tais kataporais apopsycrumena. Strongulustai Anaxagoras says clouds and rain are formed similarly. I think that means similarly to the preceding account of Anaximenes. But hail, whenever from the coalesced clouds something is pushed toward the ground that is already being turned cold in or by its descent. Apparently he adds something about the round shape of the precipitation as we saw in Epicurus, but the text in the manuscripts cuts short. But now that we're on Anaxagoras, let's look at the fragment of Anaxagoras Joanna and others cite with respect to AWP. Anaxagoras of Clazomenae is the first pre-Socratic KRS includes under the heading the Ionian Response. These were philosophers who, in reacting to the direction in which Parmenides in the Eleatics had taken philosophy, to some degree returned to the questions about nature raised by the earlier generation of Ionian Pusykoi. The fragment editors cite is one of the 6 Aetian doxae for the subject peri thalasses pos syneste kai pos estipi kra. If the topic looks familiar, it is because we already saw the first doxa from Anaximander. Anaxagoras, tu kat archaen limnasdontos hygru perikaentos hypotes heliakes periporas, kai tu leptotatu ex admistentos es halukida kai pikrian toi loipon hypostene. Anaxagoras says that Earth's water initially having stood in a stagnant pool, and its thinnest part having been burnt off by the sun's revolutions, the part that remained settled into saltiness and bitterness. This fragment of Anaxagoras is A90 in DK, along with an excerpt from Alexander's commentary on Aristotle's Meteorologica. Trite de doxa peri thalasses estin, hos ara to hudor to diates ges diethumenon kai diaplunon auten, halmiron ginetai, toi ekenten gen toi utus cumus en haute, hu semeon epoiunto, to kai halas orutestai en aute kai nitra. Enaide kai oxes cumus polacu tes ges. Tautes palin tes doxes egeneto anaxagorasta kai metrodoros. A third opinion about the sea is that the water that is percolated through the earth and washes it becomes brackish because of the earth having such juices within it. They gave as evidence of this that both salts and sodium carbonates are mined from the earth, and that there are sour juices everywhere in the earth. Again, both Anaxagoras and Metrodorus were of this opinion. Note that Diels refers the reader of Anaxagoras A90 to AWP Chapter 8. The latest edition of Diels Krantz also contains a German translation of an excerpt from the at that time unpublished Arabic version of Galen's commentary on the Hippocratic work called Epidemics. This is another case where the Greek version hasn't survived. In this excerpt, Galen criticizes Anaxagoras for his use of natron or sodium carbonate and bitter versus salty taste, or something like that. I leave it to you and the experts to reconcile the 3 accounts of Anaxagoras' theory in A90. In the previous video, I mentioned the University of Toronto's Phoenix series on the Presocratics. Patricia Curd's 2007 entry for Anaxagoras in that series contains the at that time just published Arabic text for this excerpt, along with an English translation and notes. So far, we've looked at fragments from Anaximander, Xenophanes, and Anaxagoras. The 4th fragment Jacques Joanna and others cite for comparison with AWP is DK A17 for Diogenes of Apollonia. Diogenes takes us right to the time, mid to late 5th century, that many scholars of Greek medicine believe Airs, Waters, Places was written. To put this in historical perspective, Though Aristotle called Thales the first of the Physicoi, and Thales seems indeed to have been the first Greek thinker on record to have abandoned mythological explanations of natural phenomena, Thales' status is in doubt. Recall that Diogenes Laertius treated him as one of the 7 sages, not as a philosopher. Anyway, as KRS says, Anaximander is the first for whom we have objective evidence that he made a comprehensive and detailed attempt to explain all aspects of the universe and our world. So if we set Thales aside and treat Anaximander as the first natural philosopher, at the opposite end of the chronological spectrum is Diogenes of Apollonia, of whom Simplicius says, Kai Diogenes de ho Apolloniates schedon neotatos gegonos ton peritauta schola santon, and Diogenes of Apollonia, almost the youngest of those who occupied themselves with these matters, that is, physical studies. So we're talking about a roughly 150-year period of Greek thought legitimately seen by us as the beginning of Greek and of modern Western science, leading right up to and overlapping with Hippocratic medicine and the beginnings of scientific Western medicine. And by the way, in terms of cultural history, leading right up to the intellectual milieu of Athens and Socrates' youth, as recounted by Socrates in the Phaedo. And Diogenes, for whom air, in a return to Ionian material monism, was both the material principle but also divine, is believed to be behind Aristophanes' caricature of Socrates and natural philosophy and intellectual airheads in the clouds, produced in 423. As part of his machinations to deter his son from his expensive horse-riding habits, Strepsiades decides to enroll himself in Socrates' Prontisterion, the think shop across the street. He goes there and sees Socrates' pupils with their heads fixed on the ground, and Socrates in a basket suspended in the air. The pupils are in search of the things below the earth, ta kata geis, explains a disciple. And what are you doing up there? Strepsiades asks Socrates. Aerobato kai periprono ton helion. I am walking in the air and speculating about the sun. Eped apotaru tus teus hyperprones al uk apotes geis eper. And so from your basket you look down upon the gods and not from the earth? Remember that 24 years later, after this production, the Athenians executed Socrates for impiety. Ugar anpote ex euron orthos ta meteora pragmata, me cremasas ton noema, kai temprontida lepten katamexas eston homoion aera. For I should not have discovered these celestial things correctly if I had not suspended the intellect and had not mixed the thought in a subtle form with its kindred air. This is probably a dig at Diogenes' theory about the motive force of the mind, ho nous. The Presocratics, Hippocrates, Aristophanes, Socrates and Plato, Aristotle, no wonder you are learning ancient Greek. But to get back to the business at hand, the Diogenes fragment A17 we want to look at is actually the same excerpt from Alexander's commentary on Aristotle's Meteorologica that we saw for Anaximander. There we saw that the older secular opinion about the sea recounted by Aristotle was attributed by Alexander to both Anaximander and to Diogenes, that at first the whole region about the earth was wet, but as it was being dried up by the sun, the water that evaporated became the cause of winds and the solar solstices and the lunar phases, while what was left was the sea. But when, accordingly, Diels included this as a testimonium for Diogenes also, he included the sentence that followed in Alexander's commentary. Diogenes de kaites halmirotetos tauten aitian lege, hoti anagontos tu heliu to gluku to katalepomenon kai hypomenon halmiron enai symbaine. Diogenes also says that the cause of the sea's salinity is as follows. As the sun draws up, that is from the sea, the part that is sweet, the result is that what remains is salty. It is clear that the author of AWP was familiar with the theories of the natural philosophers. It was in the air, so to speak. And the 4 fragments cited by Joanna and others broadly agree with AWP on the mechanisms of evaporation and coction and cloud formation in the production of rainwater. In fact, it is tempting for the scholars of medical history to assert that the Hippocratic author simply took his theory from the natural philosophers and to even try to determine which one. But this is not clear. In fact, it would even seem that AWP made an advance on the philosophical treatises with its argument that the sun attracts all liquids, including human sweat. As Joanna puts it in the Hippocratic account, observation of biological phenomena is used to confirm a cosmological theory. Of course, the silence of the pre-Socratic fragments could be deceiving. The problem is that, though we have a complete monograph on the subject in AWP, we only have the skimpiest of evidence as to what the natural philosophers believed. I hope this appendix broadened your perspective on AWP and stimulated your interest in the overall development of Greek thought in this early period of the Greek miracle. But now it is time to continue on with the final chapter on waters in AWP.